joining us for the ACT Employer Council today for our webinar on providing an international perspective on employer TDM programs. We're going to be discussing just the unique geographic realities and challenges that are faced by employers in different areas of the world, and the solutions that they've adopted to encourage people to use commute options other than driving alone. This is a topic that our council leadership has been interested in bringing to our members for a long time. We were talking before many of you got on that Tom's been trying to get this webinar going for about a year or 2 years now. So we're really excited that we can share this great information with you today. I'm Caryn Walline. I'm the Commute Options and Planning Manager at the University of Washington, and also have the honor of serving as the Employer Council Programming Chair. And I'll be helping to moderate today's conversation. Before we get started though, I wanted to take a moment to turn it over to Mark Melnick, our Employer Council Chair, and he's gonna just share a few announcements.
Thanks, Caryn. So I just have three quick announcements. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to welcome and congratulate our Employer Council leadership team that is made up by Tom, Caryn, Deborah, Jessica, and myself. We also have a subcommittee that's working on programming that includes Andy and Punja. So thank you all for volunteering and stepping up to help the council implement its vision and work plan over the next year. Speaking of work plan, we as a leadership team will be meeting in the next couple of weeks to draft our 2021 work plan, which we will look to share with the full Employer Council membership no later than the beginning of January to get final sign off and feedback from everyone. And so we just want to let you know that that is on the horizon and around the corner. One of the key deliverables from that work plan, though, will be sponsoring 2 sessions at the ACT International Council. So be on the lookout for an email from me this week requesting anyone who is interested in submitting a session or a proposal for a session to the Employer Council to sponsor. To let us know and send that over to us so we can review. We'll be finalizing our submissions for the conference at the end of January 2021. And then the last thing I wanted to give everyone a heads up is that after this webinar, please visit our Connect page where we will look to be continuing the discussion that started during this webinar, as well as sharing additional information about what the Employer Council is working on and any other things that may be of value to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Caryn to take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And is my screen showing right now, or?
No, it was earlier.
Okay. Great.
Oh, there it goes. There it goes.
All right.
Sometimes there's a delay.
Perfect. So, go ahead and start the presentation. Sorry for the technical difficulties here.
No problem.
Okay.
Ta-da. Okay, great.
Perfect. All right. So thanks, Mark. So just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce our speakers today. We will be hearing from Tom Harrington, who is the Global Commute Solutions Leader for Intuit Workplace. Tom is also a member of the Employer Council. He is our current vice chair. He also was recently received the TDM certified professional recognition. So that's great for you, Tom. Intuit has been a leader in TDM and international TDM for years with locations in Canada, as well as many other places in the world that he'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And then sorry. Is my screen sharing again? I'm sorry. I'm having some difficulties here.
That's okay.
I apologize for everyone. Excuse me.
It's a lesson in no matter how many times you practice.
Exactly. Sorry, so that's Tom, and we'll be hearing from him. And then we're also joined by Rui Fernandes, who is the CEO and founder of BusUp. BusUp also provides services, TDM programming, and commuter services to a number of employers internationally. They work with over 40 employers around the world. So we'll go ahead and start with Tom.
Well, thanks, Caryn, and thanks, Mark and Elizabeth. You can go on to the next slide. A little bit about Intuit is we've been around for about 37 years. Our mission is powering prosperity around the world. We are driven by our core values, and those values are shown here on the top right of your screen. They changed just this year. We've got a focus on stronger together and courage that has not been there in the past. The integrity without compromise and we care and give back have been there since I joined the company over 18 years ago. We've got 10,500 employees in 19 locations, 9 countries around the world. We have about $7.7 billion of revenue and 50 million customers in small business, consumers, and self-employed. We'll go on to the next one, Caryn. I mentioned that we have locations in 19 cities and 9 countries. Today, I'm going to talk to you about just a few of those locations. We're going to start with Canada, and this is a building slide. The next one is going to be the United Kingdom, and then finally Israel. So if you want to go on to the next one, I'll slow it down a little bit here because actually from this point, I'm only delivering 3 slides. In Canada, we've got 2 different locations. One location that has 663 employees in downtown Toronto, another one with 121 employees in downtown Edmonton. Which would you guess that we would offer most commuter benefits to? The 663, right? Nope. Because of some of the things that happened in Edmonton, we decided that we were going to offer full transit reimbursement and free in-building parking at the Edmonton site. And the reason for that was when we first moved to this site, it was on the edge of the downtown area. And if you think about downtown areas around the world, they all have some commonalities. You start getting close to homeless folks. You start getting close to higher crime on the outskirts. And also there's some drug use. And downtown Edmonton at that point, there was no exception there. We had some issues that were affecting employee morale. And what we decided to do was to make it easier for employees to get into the workplace without having to deal with challenges on the street level to get into the area. So at that point, we decided, hey, we need to do something for these folks. What are we going to do? So one of the challenges we have, of course, is parity. You've got this one site where you offer everything, and you've got another site where literally you offer nothing. So we're working to fix that, and within the next year to 2 years, we'll have that fixed as we're moving the Mississauga site to downtown Toronto in 2022. And the game plan there is to not offer any parking in the building whatsoever. So we're literally looking at trying to get all of those 663 people, or however many decide to come back into the office after COVID, we're looking at getting them all on public transit. So we're working hard on that piece in there. One of the first things that happens when you start thinking about offering commute benefits in another country is you come up with the question of, well, are the benefits going to be taxable, or are they not going to be taxable to the employee or to the employer? In the case of Canada, the Canada Revenue Agency is the taxing authority, and there's no pre-tax fringe carve-out as there is in the US. And I'll say this now for all 3 of the sites. All 3 of these sites, basically any commute benefits are taxable to the employee. Intuit being a company that delivers a tax product, especially in the US and in Canada, we want to make sure that we're squeaky clean when it comes to whether our benefits are taxed and that employees are taxed at the right amount. So for us, the tax piece is extremely important. In both these cases, we had density issues, because as you would imagine, having 121 people trying to solve for them, or 663, you can't really offer massive shuttle programs. Some weather, there were times where it was 5 degrees below Celsius in Edmonton, and are you going to want to be standing outside on the corner waiting for the bus to come by for 5 minutes to get on to head into the office? So that was a challenge too as well. And our Mississauga site is actually located at the very end of service for, I think it's My Way, I think is the agency that ends right at the end of where we're at. So there's no service offered east of the site other than directly to downtown Toronto. One of the challenges that we had in Mississauga is there are a lot of toll roads around, and of course, just like in the US, if you're going to provide any sort of a toll benefit, it's taxable to the employees. And then I also put down here what services are actually offered, what transit agencies are actually operating. And the last thing here is in Canada, we do offer EV charging for a fee at our Mississauga office. That's going to be changing when we move to downtown Toronto. So we're going to go on the next slide. This one's the, let's see, I think this one's the United Kingdom. So again, we've got 342 employees in downtown London. We're right near the Victoria Tube and the London Victoria rail stations. We do offer a in-pay transit subsidy, and I'm not a big fan of that, because once the in-pay transit subsidy comes to an employee and hits their bank account, bottom line is they don't remember that that was a transit benefit. That's looked at just part of their pay. So in London and in Petah Tikva in Israel, we offer a month pay, a monthly subsidy. In the case of the United Kingdom, it's £100 per month. We also offer no interest annual pass loans. If you're not familiar with the annual pass in the United Kingdom and most of Europe, if you get an annual pass, you save like a full month's worth of cost on riding a public transit. In London, quite often we were running across annual passes that were in excess of £5,000 per year. That's a lot of money. If you think about that, it's like 10,000. Let's say that's at least $7,500 US if you're trying to make a comparison there. We have no parking offered at the site. As you're familiar, London has a congestion tax that operates from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. We do have EV charging in the building for a fee, and there is bike share nearby. The taxing authority is Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs that offers a tax piece. Again, the economies of 342 people limit what we can offer. We're looking at launching a cycle scheme in London. We don't offer that today. One of the things we're hearing loud and clear is that bikes are going to be a great solution post-COVID. So Caryn, if you want to move on to Israel. So in Israel, again, we've got 234 employees in the Tel Aviv area. We do offer 1,000 shekels per month in pay for transit. That's equivalent to about $250 US. Roughly, it's around a 25% conversion. We do offer free parking at the site. We're very near a train station, less than a half. We do use Waze Carpool in that area. We're the 9th biggest Waze Carpool user in Tel Aviv. We do not offer a subsidy at present. It's something that we're taking a look at, seeing if we can do. The challenge, of course, is the taxability. We have bike and scooter share nearby. One of the biggest challenges we had in Israel is if you go to pull up the train schedules, you're not going to be able to pull down a train schedule as we would expect in the US, where you can find out, oh, here's a whole day's worth of trains, where they stop at what time. So putting together a schedule was a real challenge. One of the other challenges in Israel is that there's a lack of dependability on the timing of public transit, much worse than in the US. So bottom line is they're not operating anywhere near the schedules that they claim they should be. We've got heavy congestion in the area. We have a weather problem in Israel too that we need to get around. In this case, it's heat. It's very hot. The Tel Aviv area is very near beaches as well, and it's a nice resort area too as well. I mentioned the in-pay transit subsidy. We did reach out to several peers to see if they might be interested in sharing shuttles, and unfortunately, they were not. So that's where we're at with challenges and what things are going in Tel Aviv. So with that, Caryn, I'll pass it back to you.
Great presentation. And now we will turn it over to Rui, who will share his experience with BusUp and some of the employers that he's working with. I'll let you share your screen, Rui.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. Well, first of all, Elizabeth, Tom, Mark, Caryn, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this and share our experience. Well, a brief introduction of what we are and what we do. Basically, we are a service provider, means that we specialize in the management of shared corporate commute services. What we mean by management means that we combine not only technology, but also the services on the client side, I mean, on the user and on the client, with 24/7 customer care, daily operations management, cost optimization, and most recently, sanitization protocols and traceability. It's becoming very, very important. So basically, we combine two things: technology best in class with service. And as an example, I'm going to give you a couple of concepts, like who picks up the phone at 6 o'clock in the morning when a bus has a no-show. Okay, normally it's the HR department of a company. So we use technology to control the bus provider, try to prevent that. But in case we cannot prevent that, then we have a way to solve the problem to all the passengers that are on the street. Okay, basically, what are our models? So what we provide, basically, on one side, we are a service provider, like if it was a maintenance on a company or cleaning, but we're specializing in management of corporate shuttle programs. And on the other side, we are a SaaS provider. It means that the company can hire the technology from us and run it on their own with their mobility departments. Most of the cases, we have a mingle between the two. It means that sometimes the client, our client has part of internal and he wants us a 24/7 customer service. The fact is that we may work on both sides, and this is the real add value. The important is that at the end, the model is not something that belongs only to the company because they have like this internal policy, but it's also about the environment or the surroundings. But depending on public transport profile of the company, local legislation will determine which is the best model that the company is looking for. So you can have like a fast overview of what we are and where we will go in the next few years. Basically, we run nowadays on a daily basis, more or less 380 routes in 5 countries with an average of 8,000 daily passengers. And we have like more than 50 something contracts with most of the companies that you can see right here on the right, and we're expanding to Germany and Chile recently. Well, not recently, next year. Sorry. Talking about our experience and how we face normally a commute program when a company, an employer, comes to us or we identify an opportunity. Basically, we always need to consider these 6 items when we try to design our clients' TDM programs. It's very important to analyze public transport. How is public transport on that and placement in specifics? The size, the cost, the budget that the company has, whether or not she has shuttle services already in place or not. Very important local legislation, because one thing is what you want to do, the other thing is what you can do. And then more internal things related to technology awareness in the company and on the country and the parity. And finally, and this more recently has become almost key, is everything that is related to COVID and sanitization protocols, etc. I will look at, I will take a very close look into each one of those now. Regarding public transportation, when we normally face a new challenge, a new implementation to manage, obviously we are operational in two major continents. So when we move into Europe, we have a very good public transport solution downtown and between towns, and in some cases between some city centers and business parks. If we're going to Latin America, that does not happen. It means that normally you have good public transport within the city and in some cases with between major cities. So basically what we have to solve is how to, in Europe, solve the outflows or the intercities, and in Latin America, basically we have to try to provide our companies with like all the types of mobility to their commuters. It's important to understand that we normally only operate on the suburbs, because normally downtown in city centers, companies tend to have the commute solved with micromobility, public transport, etc. Okay. And one interesting thing regarding Europe is now that all public transport infrastructure is designed radially towards city centers. That means that if you live on a city and you want to go to a business park and you don't have a public transport direct line, it takes you so much time to do the U-round that you end up picking up in your car. Okay, so this is more or less the challenge that we face regarding public transport. Regarding sharing and costs that I mentioned before, it's very important when our companies implement corporate programs to identify the most suitable financing model. And here I want to make a comment about what sharing means for BusUp and what sharing means for our clients. Sharing means not sharing with your nearby companies only, but also with subcontractors, employers, or the company themselves. Basically, is sharing a cost. Why is this important? Because at the end, when you finance, when we see companies building commute programs, it becomes very important to maintain them to ensure a continuity, so that they can really use it as an added value tool for talent engagement and retention. It has been proved, we have cases that once they have a commute program, they made, and I will give you examples later, that they basically use our routes in order to create engagement campaigns for workers, because they have a much higher retainment capacity if you provide a commute service. Regarding legislation, these are some examples that we normally encounter when we implement a project. And here we have different realities, Europe and Latin America. One thing that we have in common, and the United States also has this particularity, is that there have been a lot of restrictions to the use of car. For instance, in Europe, you have a lot of taxes. For instance, diesels before 2006 and gasoline before 2000 are not allowed to get into Barcelona, Madrid, or Lisbon. In Latin America, for instance, all companies obligated to provide transportation to his workers. Okay, and the United States, I believe that if you overpass a certain number of cars in a business park, then the government will tax you an extra fee, or don't even let you build additional buildings if you overpass this number. Other important things in Europe is legislation. It's a very complicated environment because it's very protective. In Latin America, there are safety issues. I mean, we need to take in consideration all these variables when to build the best commute program. I don't want to waste much with this, but one interesting thing is even within the same company, we face challenges like some people are very technological and some people are not that much. And you need to have the ability to identify how can everybody be integrated into the same program. but understanding the different realities of each worker within the company and between companies or even geographies. Okay. Another challenge that we normally face, Tom commented earlier, it's parity. Sometimes companies are very committed to implement commute programs, and when I mean commute programs, we're not talking only about shuttles, we're talking about sustainable mobility programs, but they face the fact that if you provide mobility to some, you need to provide something else to the other ones that cannot use that. So parity is becoming very, very important, especially in our last implementations. Actually, we had a couple of ones that had to be delayed because they had to implement a parity program before. Obviously, most of the industries except Zoom, we were faced with a challenge with COVID that turned to be a very interesting opportunity for BusUp, because companies are very sensitive to contagious, workers are reluctant to go to the office, and normally companies build very strong protocols within the building, but they lose track of what happens from the house of where the worker leaves the house and reaches the building. So the traceability becomes very important. So basically we implement prevention and sanitization protocols in all our operations, and basically most of our recent clients were starting during COVID, and not only on factory, but also on buildings and sharing between companies with this kind of protocol. So a fast overview of what changed when a company comes to us and asks us to manage their commute program. Normally cost reduction and talent management were like number one and number two reasons to hire a service such as us. And booking and traceability, flexibility was not so important. Right now, the post-COVID is all about flexibility. And the important here is that imagine a passenger that moves 5 days a week to the office, and now he has to move only 3 out of 5. That means that what happened to that bus the 2 days that is not going. So basically you have like a down occupancy at 40%. So you need to have in place a very flexible booking system. So basically companies, they want to take 70 people on a 50 size bus every week. So how you do that? With a booking system. Traceability, and then it comes the cost reduction, talent management. And one interesting thing is that we're come across with a lot of companies that now see environment and sustainable mobility as a key issue. I think because they tasted what it is to live in a city without pollution. So now is one of the most key elements, especially on big corporations, international corporations, where they want to have a unified and homogeneous commute program. Another interesting thing is the initiatives that we are facing, that we're seeing happening. And here, most of them that we're registering are in Europe. And interesting things are happening and are all coming from governments mostly. But for instance, in Spain, we have a new government initiative to subsidize up to 50% of the investment in all kinds of sustainable mobility projects. And that's not just for commute shuttles, but also for e-bicycles, car sharing, carpooling, anything that can be sustainable somehow. The government subsidizes up to 50%. Basically, they are pushing or even enforcing companies to provide commute alternatives, and with the intention to fight the excessive use of combustion vehicles. Finally, and before we end up this presentation, I'm going to give you 3 examples of 3 clients we have. One client is a retailer, is in Brazil, and basically he hired BusUp because he has different sites all over Latin America, and he needs not only to control its site in particular and understand the occupancies, the costs per site, but he's using the routes and the occupancies to orient recruiting campaigns to increase employees' retention. Retailers have a high rotation problem, so it's very important for them to make sure that those people remain on the company as long as possible, because it will reduces a lot their cost on training. Okay. The second case is in Portugal. Basically, two of the most important banks in Portugal and one technology company came together to create a consolidated network of shuttle services. An interesting case about this is that we got this contract in 17th of March, and it started the 1st of June in the mid of the COVID crisis. And 1 month after we started this operation, we had a COVID case, and one of the companies contacted us, what do I do? And I said, well, you can access all the information on the system, but we will make you a report. And within 15 minutes, everybody was notified that they were in contact with a COVID person, and they were set apart, and new people were replaced. And basically the company, we even got emails from the passengers thanking that they were notified because they were living with their grandmother, etc. So this is a very, very interesting case about cost reduction and service availability. And finally, this is a more recent project, started September 1st. Basically, it's one of the most important real estates in Spain, a real estate company in Spain. He provides a service app for all the employees of the building, and basically recently incorporated their own shuttle services into their mass platform, because they integrated with a mass platform. And the interesting thing is that he's providing a booking system on their own shuttle routes. We created an on-demand routes that basically are booked up to the day before, and then we redesigned the routes for the following morning. And the innovation about this is that any user from this, any worker of this that are related to this real estate company can book any route on BusUp marketplace of routes in Madrid. So this is actually one of the most recent and interesting projects. And basically, that's it. That's what I had to say. I'll pass to you, Caryn, again.
Thanks, Ray. That was great. It was good to hear about all the different case studies that you've been working with different employers around the world. So now we'd like to open it up for questions from all of you. So if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll turn your mic on. Or you can also type it out in the chat. While we're giving folks a minute to think of questions, I'll go ahead and get us started. So this is Rui talked a lot about sort of the impact and reaction from COVID-19. Tom, I'm interested in hearing your feedback of sort of with the recent COVID-19 flare-ups happening around the world. What has your reaction to that been? How you've adapted?
Yeah, so one thing that's really been common is we're seeing a focus on safety that wasn't there before. You know, in the past, safety and sanitary practices probably were down there around 4th or 5th on the list of needs in terms of priority. And today it's number 1 in terms of priority. So making sure that you're communicating with your riders, and so they know what the practices are you're doing, whether it's fogging or whether it's the HEPA filters that you're using in your circulation system on your shuttles, or the masks, the antibacterial, what's been wiped down. That's really important. And I think that's been the biggest focus. Also seeing a move to see increased cycling, especially after we reopen the offices. I think one of the things you see is it's really easy to control your social distancing on a bicycle, unless you're stopped and somebody comes up and rides up right next to you. So it's much easier to control your environment.
Great, thanks, Tom. Did anyone have any questions for our panelists?
Okay, I have a question. So I'm especially interested, especially Rui, you touched on in Europe, so many governments are increasingly promoting sustainable transportation. It's not entirely surprising, I think, from, having watched transportation in Europe for a long time, but are there any examples or catchphrases or lessons that we can use here in this country to kind of push companies? And I mean, government might be too much of a stretch, I don't know, but like what seems to sell the best in that we could potentially use in this country?
Interesting. In Lisbon, for instance, recently they created what they call the Great Pact for Mobility among the biggest companies in Portugal. Actually, they started with 40 and they're almost reaching 100 or something like this. And we're talking about top number one, like the top list of the companies, and they committed on an official event to reduce carbon footprint emissions on all kind of actions that are related to mobility, and they actually have to do it because the government is following it. I don't know exactly what are the penalties. It is like you commit, and if you don't do it, you get penalties, but you commit anyway. So if you search like Lisbon Mobility Pact and agreement, you will see the companies who are actually part of that as a solution, and we commit ourselves also. And for instance, in Barcelona, they created, actually they launched recently a publication, the government, that we actually helped writing our part, where the government subsidize any commute route, means shuttle bus, that is shared and between companies on the suburbs. They share up to a maximum of, I don't know, it's 40 or 50,000 euros a year per company. If you promote sustainable mobility, share on the concept of asset management, not because it's BusUp, but because they believe that you need to share in order to have like a more integrated mobility solution. Okay, and for instance, Madrid government launched recently a program to allow private and public integration, because normally you have like public transport on one side and private companies trying to fight on the other. No, so basically now you can plug in with the government, so you can sell their own tickets and they can buy your tickets. So it's very interesting things that are being done, not only on technology side, but also on promoting indirectly and financing indirectly these kind of solutions.
Interesting, thanks.
I have a question. I think here in the United States, we see what other countries do with public transportation and with alternative modes. And I think we assume that there's such a better perception of public transportation in other countries. Is that necessarily true? And have you come into any instance where you've gotten, feedback or pushback from folks because they really don't have such a great perception of public transportation?
That's for me?
Either one would be great.
Tom, you first.
Oh, okay. I think you're the expert on this, but I will say that right now, our London office, we actually tried to open it with a wave one after COVID. And one of the things we ran into was there was a lack of confidence in public transit, basically the safety, the cleaning in public transit. So that's one of the reasons why we're actually pursuing a little bit more for cycling in the UK. I would say in general, the places that we offer services, usually there's not the the stigma that there is in the US of public transit and it not being attractive. But at the same time, it really depends area by area and where you're at on what that looks like. I would say that the experiences that I've seen outside the US, public transit has been very clean, very efficient, and things that you can actually count on. US is getting that way. I mean, to be honest with you, we've seen some great improvements. One thing that's going to be a byproduct out of COVID is you're going to see safer transportation and safer practices on public transportation.
I can talk to you about public transportation that I live on a daily basis with our employers, with our clients, but in general, Spain, Portugal, not Brazil, but Europe in general, but in our case, Spain and Portugal, they have a very, very, very good public transport network, okay? Downtown, I mean, and even between cities. Obviously, they cannot connect everything because of a critical mass issue, but you have a very, very good public transport, metro, bus, everything. We have like 500 kilometers of bicycle lines in Barcelona. That's huge. You can reach Madrid, Barcelona just on bicycle. And actually, there are some numbers that I have identified that only 8% of the I think it's 8% of the contagions are done on public transport of the overall. So it's much lower, the risk on public transport, at least in Europe, than what people think. The problem normally is misunderstood, I think, is not about the unsafety, is the traceability when you have a case, because you just lose the traceability and you cannot trace public transport. So I think that in Europe, this is one of the big issues. If we move to Latin America, that changes completely, because I face on first hand to be pushed by somebody to get into the metro because there was no space. So basically, I mean, I think chickens on their house are less tied than people moving on metros in São Paulo, for instance. So obviously, if you have a metro that is designed for 100 and you have 300 people inside, so this is not a good public transport. It was not before COVID and is not now, okay? So I think you cannot standardize public transport. I would say depends on the city and depends on the country. I strongly think that public transport is part of the solution, because a company cannot support commute programs if it does not support with public transport, because it's unpayable, because commute programs are very expensive. And it's a very key, important issue to have it on as part of your commute program.
Thank you.
I think you had a question. Oh, Mark, did you have a question?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there. So both our speakers mentioned parity and the importance of trying to achieve parity. So I was wondering, with the diverse locations that you are serving, like what type of coordination is needed with the local teams and the central organization to be able to achieve parity across the board? And in your experience, do you think parity can truly be achieved, like in the minds of the employee?
Wow, what a great question.
Thank you.
So one of the challenges I really had was working with the local team in Israel, for example. Basically, the local team, transportation wasn't part of the facility manager's charter. It wasn't part of our outsourced charter, yet I have no legs, I have no arms or legs in Israel to be able to deliver my product. So what I need to do is I need to count on him. And initially he was holding everything very, very close and wouldn't share it out. And it took me a good 3 or 4 months to force him to get to the point where he was sharing and allowing me to be a part of the process. He had some great ideas and some things to bring in. You really need to have somebody in the country who understands what the culture is, what the systems are, and what the real experiences are to be able to deliver a solution. So I think that's a real necessary step. when you start talking about trying to offer the same solutions, when you don't have the same infrastructure in different countries, for instance, van pools, they don't exist in Israel. It's not a possible solution. Although the Dan bubble solution with VIA is looking a little bit like that, kind of a quasi van pool. I don't think you're ever going to get true parity, but I think you could always stress to come closer to that. Different areas in the United States, for example, that I have sites at. I've got a site in Boise, Idaho, and I've got 500 people there. And I can't deliver them a public transit solution because we're so far away from the nearest public stop. And they all live so close that a van pool isn't a good solution, yet they're far enough apart within that ring that a shuttle isn't a good solution either. So I have a real struggle there with being able to offer there. So in answer to your question, Mark, I think we strive to offer true parity, but I don't think we're ever going to be able to deliver it. And Rui, I don't know what you think.
Well, I'm on the other side. I'm part of the solution. So what I can tell you is a little bit of what I see, or what we face. Some clients simply don't care unless the unions force them to implement a parity program. But as the company becomes bigger, the client, especially in Europe, that becomes more important because probably unions are more strong. What I have seen is that, and this is actually, it was very fast, the implementation, but basically the company defined like a 80 euros budget per worker, period. And then you can use it like on internet, on transport, on buying a computer. They implemented with a startup that runs this kind of thing, like sort of ad and bread and stuff like that. And basically they like 80 euros. You just do whatever you want. And they use our tech to run the difference between the 80 euros and what the travel cost was, so that we can charge the end user the difference. So this was one of the examples that we've seen. In Latin America, we don't have that. So basically the company decides and the people say yes. So I think parity has become more as a company strategy. I'm saying, okay, it's more important in Europe for companies and for workers than it is in Latin America. And I don't see much, I would say, much concern neither for the workers and the companies in Latin America at the moment. And I'm seeing every time more in Europe.
Did anyone else have any questions for our panelists today? I had one other question I wanted to follow up with both of you on. So we talk about these programs and the different factors that go into them. I'm curious, how are you measuring program success in each of these locations? And then what metrics are you tracking in the different locations as well?
So for me, I'm really looking at ridership, and ridership is the overwhelming item that I'm looking at, that I'm focusing on. As an aside, I'm also calculating the carbon savings that are associated with it too as well, because Intuit does track our scope 3 emissions, which include the employee commute. So that's another piece that I look at. But you know, I look at some things like on-time performance, and I have service levels tied to those. But if we've got a partner that's missing on service levels for on-time performance, we've got a bigger problem. So that's the way I look at it on that. For the most part, it's are we growing ridership? Are our riders happy? Customer satisfaction is another one that I look at. I think that's pretty much the two key ones for me. Rui?
Well, we're judged on our case by companies such as Tom's, Normally, one of the reasons that company hires is for us to help them run the commute program and keep them optimized in order to minimize the cost as much as possible. So one of the things that you somehow are evaluated is the occupancy. So whether you have a 70, 80, 90, 60% occupancy, because at the end that reflects on the cost per passenger month and route. So they control the cost per passenger month and route, and they control occupancy, and they use this to say, look, you're doing a good job or a bad job trying to do it, okay? And at the end, the important thing is that cost per passenger month, normally they compare, or we have like a reference number that it should never go more than 1.5 to 2 times the cost of public transport to do the same distance. So it's a very good reference. So if you are on over 2x the cost of public transport to do the same origin destination route, then you should try to optimize your service. So basically, this is how we try to run this kind of relations with clients.
We have time for one more question. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask.
5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar from the ACT Employer Council. We really appreciate you joining the conversation. And I just want to thank Tom and Rui for all of the work that they did on their presentations and all of the information that you shared with us. It was great. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
you.
I wish you all happy
Thanks,
and safe
everyone.
holidays. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.